Federals hit these woods, they inundated the Confederates in these trenches. For a brief moment, there is hand-to-hand combat. Now, we all read about hand-to-hand combat ad nauseum, but it rarely happened in reality because the weapons are so deadly at such extreme ranges that rarely do men meet face-to-face to bludgeon and stab. Here is one of those moments where it happens. As these trenches are literally hit with a tidal wave of Zouaves, Maryland Stewart's men are driven physically out of the trench and into a deep ravine, which unfolds in front of you. As the Federals pursue them, the Confederates start fighting Indian fashion, fighting behind trees, fighting as individuals. Even from our point of view, we can see the field behind you, we can hear the traffic, but we cannot see the other side of the road. As we go into the ravine, your visibility is even more limited. The audible aspects of the battle are more limited. The last thing that Zouaves know here is that Bartlett has been eminently successful in driving home the attack. They are going to attempt to mirror that image on our side of the road. That will lead to disaster.
Meanwhile, as Jones is, as the Federals have scored success at the expense of Jones and Stuart's right wing, the 1st and 3rd North Carolina and the 10th Virginia, the Federals will press on. Now, Robert Rhodes is arriving on the field. This will be the 2nd Division of Ewell's Corps to arrive. And he deployed astride the road some 300 yards further to the west of us is Cullen Battles Brigade. This is an Alabama brigade. It's Rhodes's brigade that he led at Antietam. It was led by a fellow that Robert E. Lee had shipped after the Battle of Gettysburg, Edward O'Neill, and now they're led by a real fighting man, Cullen Battle. So as the Union troops, particularly of Bartlett's men, who are out in front of the Zouaves, are going to think they're going to score a success as they drive in to Battles Brigade. Soon the 3rd and the 5th Alabama break, and it looks like the Union are about to score a major success. But the 6th Alabama, which at Antietam had been Gordon's regiment, and the 61st Alabama, which was a new regiment, having replaced the 26th Alabama, which went south so Lee could get rid of O'Neill, will strike the Federals at the right moment. And the right moment will be about 300 yards to the west of us. At the same time, or since nobody is covering the area north of Saunders Field, where General Sedgwick's division is supposed to be. Griffin had been told that Sedgwick would be there. When he had first sighted the enemy, he had sent back to Warren and asked if Sedgwick going to be there. Sedgwick had said, yes, he'll be there. And suddenly, at about the same time, and remember the 4 regular regiments really have a number of men equal to the 140th New York, the Rochester Regiment. And they'll suddenly see storming out of the woods to the north and to the west, out in the woods. This is going to be the men of Stafford's, the Stonewall Jim's brigade, the old Stonewall Brigade, and Stafford's Louisiana Brigade. And needless to say, these 4 regular battalions will collapse in face of this savage blow delivered against them by the 2 Confederate brigades that have nobody to their front. And I think you can just imagine what's going through Griffin's mind. Warren is a fool. Meade is a fool. Why did they order me forward here, assure me that there would be a division at least on my right, and there's no one there. Now, with the 61st Alabama and the 6th Alabama attacking, Bartlett's men will start to give ground. We brought up Shelton's 2 guns. Shelton's 2 guns, and there will be our only artillery we'll bring up. Again, Lee's reason to fight in the wilderness, to nullify the Union great superiority in artillery. So Shelton's guns are going to be positioned just where that single gun is down there, 2 of them. And as you look from here, you can see the ravine becomes deeper and deeper as it goes out in the southeast direction. Where it's level ground is done by the Virginia VDOT, the Virginia Highway Department, and the Park Service when they put in that parking lot and level the ground. So Shelton puts his guns in, and they're trying to fire up the axis of that ravine. So they're firing from southeast to northwest, and they're going to be doing a lot more damage to their friends than they're doing to their enemy. So the tide is turning very, very rapidly against Griffin's division in this area here. And we'll hear later on it's also turning rather decisively against the division to the left, where you have the Iron Brigade now commanded by General Cutler, and that's the division commanded by General Wadsworth, but we'll be there in the afternoon. So the tide is definitely changing, and soon I'm going to sadly say, as General Griffin, we're going to have to abandon the field with our division and fall back into those woods to the east of us and to the south of the road. And we're going to leave our 2, or Shelton is going to have to leave his 2 cannons behind, and we'll let our friend Frank take over now, as the Union have been bested. The 2nd Corps is working very well. They've absorbed the attack. Johnson absorbed the attack of Griffin, and now as Rhodes brings his men up, after checking the advance of Bartlett, he is going to have Wadsworth's division, where he is in big trouble, but we'll learn about that this afternoon. Right?
Back over here. All right, the Union attack has failed. The Zouaves have been driven out of the woods. The Confederates counterattacking, pushing them, driving them out. Other Confederates who had threatened to turn their position and surround them are going to be firing down the whole column. As they leave these woods, more Zouaves are going to wind up as casualties trying to get out of here than fell getting into here. As everything washes out of the woods and cascades down the hillside towards Shelton's guns, the Confederates are going to counterattack into the field. We're going to see another bout of hand-to-hand combat occur down around Shelton's guns. But it is going to be one of the most absurd battles of the war. So what I thought we would do is actually walk down into the ravine, take a look at that, and then maybe go up and take a look at the Union trenches.
Yes.
All right. So we're going to go back down the ravine. Your prerogative, you can leave as a fleeing Zouave or as a charging Confederate.
Wow.
We're unable to fire because there were too many Zouaves in the way. When the last Zouaves were gone, the first Confederates were already there. And a battle of hand-to-hand combat broke out around the guns. But it was absurd, because it was not what you would anticipate. It was not Union versus Confederate. In an odd twist, it was Confederates fighting other Confederates over who captured the guns. Maryland Stewart's North Carolinians insisted that they got here first. So when they met Cullen Battle's Alabamans, they told them to mind their business and move on. Cullen Battle's men insisted they had been here first and told the Tar Heels to get lost. Words were exchanged, pushing and shoving escalated, and then it turned into out-and-out Donnybrook, where the men started beating each other to a pulp, knocking teeth out, blacking eyes, and Shelton's crew standing here mortified, watching the whole thing. Meanwhile, with this diversion, the Zouaves have been able to escape across the field, where they meet with the belated reinforcements who will be able to step forward, fire into this group, and scatter them like blackbirds back up into the woods. Bottom line, neither Alabama nor North Carolina thought to take the guns with them. After dark, it took some ambitious Virginians to steal out into no man's land and to spirit the guns out. So there's a lot of Alabama teeth and a lot of North Carolina black eyes left here, but it's Virginia that gets the prize.
That sounds like
The Union attack. The Union attack has failed. A Confederate counterattack has failed. And we are now back where these respective sides started on Saunders Field, and we are stalemated, digging in, furious.
All right. Charles Griffin gets on his horse and rides back to where Meade and Grant and their staffs are gone. He gets up and he sees Charles Griffin. He gets off his horse and discusses, why did you send me in there? Why? What do you have for brains? You son of a dog! Why did you send me in there and tell me I would be supported on my right? What is the matter with you? What do you have for brains? Grant is standing there listening. And Grant goes over. This is General Grant. Grant here is listening at all. And Grant gets very upset about it. His Chief of Staff, General Rollins, is more upset. You do not have a junior speak to his commanding officer. And Grant goes up to General Meade. There is General Meade right there. And Meade notices, see, you're going to be General Grant. And General Meade notices As Grant comes up to him and says, General Meade, you've got to do something about General Gray. Meade has realized that isn't General Gray. Greg's a cavalryman anyway. So Meade goes up after he got these orders from Grant. You've got to do something with General Gregg. General Meade, the old snapping turtle, has noticed that Grant's top button is. So he'll reach out very calm and will button Grant's top button. And he will say, General Grant, the man's name is General Charles Griffin, and he's just like that.
That's the way he's doing it.
And Grant suddenly realizes that he has taken action which was none of his business. And he shows that he doesn't know the Army of the Potomac leaders very well. So at this moment, it is Meade that is calm, and it's Grant that has lost his cool. Okay? Huh?
All right.
Now we're going up.
These trenches were erected late on May 5th, after Griffin's assault has been repulsed. The 6th Corps does show up. They do assume a considerable portion of the line, and we hook the 5th and the 6th Corps together. They entrench. This line is going to be rather uneven. The reason I brought you out here is to show you a vast open ravine in front of you. There are several watersheds that wander off to the north of us, out beyond your vision. The Union line is going to go over a couple of those humps and then go into a deep ravine like this and just stop. It is not anchored on anything. It goes out into the woods and decides that the woods itself will be their protection, and that will defend the flank. The Confederates, however, are extremely adept at going through the wilderness and finding Union flanks. They have a precedent for that. And on May 6th, the second day of the battle, the Confederates out to the far left of Jubal Early's line are led by John Brown Gordon. And Gordon will find the Union flank, report that it is undefended, and that there is an opportunity to turn the Union position. Gordon loves to tell us that how he had to overcome all opposition to get his will enforced. That he went to his division commander, and Jubal Early said, "No way. You can't flank them. They will flank us." He went over Early's head to Richard Ewell, who was an indolent character who vacillated back and forth and wanted to know, what does Early say? And immediately falls under his spell. Later on in the day, Robert E. Lee will make a personal appearance here, begging the 2nd Corps to do something to seize the initiative. Richard Ewell will vacillate some more, Jubal Early will be adamant some more, and Gordon will step out of ranks in front of his commander and his commander's commander and say, "General Lee, I have a plan." And Lee will give it its blessing, and they will launch a flank attack. It's on map 7. The delightful part about this is it's all fiction. Gordon played fast and loose with truth because he thought that the moral of the story transcends the accuracy of the story. So we don't have to get the facts right, just as long as you get the essence right. And the essence is, Gordon is a genius. If you can walk away with that, you're okay. All right, so what really happens is that while the 6th Corps does not guard its flank, remember what Ed said about the 9th Corps. They don't show up until the end of the 5th, the beginning of the 6th, when they're marching onto the battlefield on Germanna Road, which is to the north of us. So Gordon, looking in a small circle, sees a Union flank. Early, looking in a big circle, sees the 9th Corps above his flank. It's late in the day when the Ninth Corps is gone. The problem is gone. Early will initiate the idea of a flank attack. Gordon will go out, check it again, realize that it's still open and vulnerable, and will come up with a plan that is dramatically elaborate and far too elaborate to succeed. They will take 2 brigades, Georgians under Clement Ansel Evans, and North Carolinians under R.D. Johnston, and they will go out clean on the end of the Union flank like crossing a T and drive right down the length of it. As the Union line unravels, Confederates and the rest of the Confederate line will start to come forward in echelon, one after another. There are 2 things that Civil War soldiers hate in this world. They hate to fight in woods, and they hate to fight at night. And Gordon is going to have them do both at the same time in a converging attack where no one can see anybody. The attack will have a tremendous impact. The Sixth Corps will be routed, or a considerable portion of it, but the Confederate success is going to undo itself. As troops come forward in echelon, they will either miss the battle altogether, or they will fire into the Confederates and paralyze their efforts. Gordon eventually is going to realize that the Federals are starting to concentrate. They are going to bounce back. And Gordon will have to fight one of the most tenacious battles of his life just to get back to his own lines. Gordon's flank attack, the great opportunity, actually is probably a little bit over-embellished. The Confederates' greatest accomplishment was surviving Gordon's opportunity.
Just the only thing to add, Grant more or less keeps his cool on the 6th. He goes through 24 cigars to die of cancer of the throat. But again, he does keep his cool during the height of this Gordon attack. The rumor will reach headquarters, and it will be that Sedgwick's corps has been routed. Sedgwick is either dead or captured. It throws the headquarters of the Army of the Potomac into confusion. And Grant will come up with one of his quoted remarks. He says, "Quit talking about what General Lee is going to do. Let's think of what we can do. The first thing you're going to tell me that General Lee jumped up in the air, did a double somersault, and came back in our rear." And so it shows at least Grant may have lost his cool on the 5th, but he has it on the 6th. And we better get back to the bus because I'm looking at when the crucial decision is made on the 5th that they're going to have to deal with the Confederates. Lee is now in a position he is calling the tune. With the Confederates advancing where we just came from successfully, and on the Orange Plank Road, he has seized the initiative. It means that Grant and Meade cannot be thinking about going to Spotsylvania and out of the wilderness until something happens here. And so this is the place from where Warren, on map 3, will deploy his men. He will send Crawford by this farm country road, which you can no longer go on, as it goes through a development now to the tuning house, Mount Era, and Mount View, and the collision and to give serious problems to Hill's Column, and he will send Warren will send Griffin out to where we met them. So this will be a very important place for the battle. We're just killing time here. So we're going into the house where General Warren has his command post. The house has been, the room has been refurnished as Morris Schaff describes it. And this is where you're going to hear about Morris Schaff, man that believes in duty, honor, and country. West Pointers do not lie. And Frank is going to tell you about it when we get on site, inside. Anything before we go in the house? Frank?
Just a couple things real quick. The house was built in the end of the 18th century, in the 1770s. It was a private residence right up into the 1970s. And it was only in 2 families in the course of that time. Coincidentally named Jones. So, not related to each other, but 2 families. Over the course of time, it has been visited by numerous dignitaries. Robert Edward Lee's father, Light Horse Harry Lee, spent time here after he had been in a debtor's prison in Spotsylvania courthouse. He may have started writing his memoirs of his campaign in the South from this building. We know that Robert E. Lee himself stayed here in the winter of 63, 64, on an inspection with his chief of artillery, William Nelson Pendleton. They got caught in a storm. They spent the night here. Lee probably had no idea that he was staying in a building that his father had visited. Granny Pendleton being just one of those generals that got to stay here. There's nothing remarkable about him. Except
Bob Crick models himself after.
now that
Temporarily speechless.
now, just this idea of Bob Crick being Granny Pendleton is a little hard to swallow. But I'm not telling him. During the Battle of the Wilderness, numerous Union generals are going to be visiting here. A couple of them are going to try to make it their headquarters. Only a couple of them are going to succeed. Samuel Wiley Crawford is going to make his headquarters here until he gets bumped by his corps commander. Governor Kimball Warren takes over, throws him out. Ambrose Everett Burnside tends to pull rank and make this his headquarters, but Warren, being such an obstinate person, resists him. They wind up sharing the building between them, so that from the door to the left is the 5th Corps headquarters, from the door to the right is the 9th Corps headquarters. Imagine the traffic coming in and out the door. As Ed has already pointed out, Grant and Meade have met up here. They're going to spend the evening of the 5th conversing with their generals, hatching their plans to seize the initiative and launch an overwhelming offensive on the 6th. That plan is hatched and matured here. So this becomes really the nerve center of the entire Union operation in 1864, for at least those first critical couple hours of the campaign. I keep waiting for the door to open up and they don't. So we're going to force the door.
The lady that greeted us when we came in, her grandparents lived in the house. She used to visit her grandparents here.
The Joneses.
Well, they would be descended down, yeah. Now, General Grant has decided and told General Meade, I want an attack on the by 4 a.m. on the 6th with everybody involved. Now, at the close of the fighting on the 5th, Hill's 2 divisions are battered. They've been fighting since about 1 o'clock against first just one Union division, but by the end of the day, they're fighting 3 of Hancock's divisions and Getty's division, and they're badly fought out. Lee knows, and that's all I'm going to say now, Lee knows that Longstreet is coming. Lee believes that Longstreet will arrive during the night of the 5th and 6th, and the orders go out to Hill, just have your men sleep where they are. You're not going to entrench. They've fallen back to that ridge where our bus is parked. And it continues on straight through the Plank Road, and down about another half mile or so. So they're going to get a good night's sleep to rest, because Lee believes that General Longstreet will arrive well before morning, and he'll have Longstreet relieve Hill's 2 divisions. Also in the area that has not been engaged is Dick Anderson's division of the 3rd Corps. Now, Hancock has been given a sledgehammer. This is not the 11th Corps. This is the elite corps of the Union Army. And he also has the division commanded by General Getty. So he has the better part of 5 divisions. His corps alone totals about 27,000 men. And he has Wadsworth's division. So we're now up that his force is the better part of 7 divisions. Now the Union divisions at the time of the Battle of the Wilderness total almost 6,000 men. Take 7 times 6, and you're going to get an idea of how strong Hancock's force is. They've taken casualties, so probably do it 7 times 6, and subtract about 4,000 men from them as dead and strikers. General Warren is going to attack, and General Sedgwick, the men to the front, north and south of the turnpike. So that means that everything goes right. The battle should end fairly early that morning. The Union have trouble too. And Hancock is going to have to ask for a delay of 45 minutes to an hour. So let's say his time of attack is now set back at 5 o'clock. Warren and Sedgwick do nothing. And the Confederates of Ewell are going to attack Sedgwick and Warren. Sedgwick, of course, is less Getty's division. And the fight will be rather indecisive. But that still means that the Confederates have more or less neutralized Sedgwick and Warren. Warren is short one of his divisions, because one of his divisions, Wadsworth, you can see where he is here, coming down on the flank. Well, the Confederates are not entrenched. Many of them have not been drawing their ammunition, and the Yankees are going to attack. They're going to come out into this area here where we have this field. Now, when I asked my friend Frank when he came here, because before Frank came here, this field was woods. It had been acquired by a visit. You fellows in the Chicago Round Table were here in 1962. And you had Dr. Giddings of Battle Creek, Michigan with you, and this field, not in woods, was bought by Dr. Giddings who was here with the Chicago Round Table back in 1962. But the field now has its about its confines. South of the roads is in typical wilderness vegetation. Well, they're not ready for an attack. They're not entrenched. They haven't thrown up breastworks. So naturally, it is going to be a mission impossible for the two battered divisions with Wilcox out there about where our bus is, and he's on his right. They're going to be pushed back. As we get to around 7 o'clock, things are desperate here. South of the road, the Federals have advanced more rapidly through the woods. South of the road, the Feds have. North of the road, they're moving slower because in the distance, as you can see on your map now, about 100 yards before we get into the timber, William Pogue has his battalion of artillery, 16 guns. And they're going to discourage the Union battle lines to come out moving across this field, but not the Union skirmishers. South of the road, the Union have outstripped the fellows up here. They've advanced more rapid because there's no artillery. Typical of this situation, as Robert E. Lee is very, very concerned. If Longstreet doesn't get here very soon, it's going to be the end for the Army of Northern Virginia. So as Lee is sitting his horse back there, there's a single gun there to define the position held by Pogue's battery. It is about 300 yards west of these evergreen trees. 16 guns, the rightmost gun near the almost on the plank road, and the leftmost gun in the edge of the woods. Now as he's watching, Lee sees something that's bad. He can see retreating along the plank road. He sees a brigade of troops retreating, and he recognizes it as the Brigade of South Carolinians commanded by John McGowan. Like McGowan. So he's going to ride up to General McGowan, and he's going to say, General McGowan, what is your fine brigade running like a passel of geese? A rather harsh words to hear from Marsh Robert. McGowan will tell Marsh Robert, well, if we can just find a place to rally, we can rally there, and you can see how we can, if we are truly geese. But Lee it seems like midnight is about ready to strike for the Army of Northern Virginia. Remember, Hancock is using over 30,000 men. And remember, and Hancock knows what's in front of him. He has pushed the enemy back. It's no surprise. And these guys would look with disdain on the 11th Corps. These guys will brag, and the brag will be good until the 10th day of May, that they have not lost a cannon to those Confederates since May of 1862. They consider themselves the elite in the Army. Now we've got to switch over to something more exciting, because smaller numbers usually get enthusiasm. Because the Yankees, it's like a sledgehammer. that the Union have hit them with here. And now we're going to bring on General Robert E. Lee and how he's going to see it. Remember, he believed Longstreet would be here during the night and have relieved and thrown up earthworks and breastworks and that meant that these fellows would not be opposed to the sledgehammer that they are unprepared. General Lee. I've now moved him up from Power Smith to General Lee.
Have you ever seen a faster promotion in your life? Funny how I get to be Robert E. Lee just at the moment that he is facing his ultimate crisis.
Yeah.
No easing me into this job, General. What I'm going to do is a little unprecedented, but because of the nature of the ground, I think we can do it. We're going to make a beeline straight across this ugly field, straight over to the Evergreens. Yay. Let's talk about Lee over there. Best, and it reflects among his troops. They fought a tenacious battle on May 5th, primarily for survival rather than to win. When the sun set in these woods, they were exhausted, and they collapsed wherever the fighting had ended. Their line was not straight. It was all over the place. One person likened it to a wormwood fence. During the course of the night, the division commanders Harry Heath and Cadmus Marcellus Wilcox both appealed to A.P. Hill to number one, straighten out their line, and number two, to entrench their line. A.P. Hill insisted that the men, like himself, should rest. Assured that Longstreet would take over their front and their responsibility, it was no longer important for A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps to fortify this line. That is incredibly short-sighted. Even if they were not going to be responsible on May 6th, they did not give Longstreet anything to defend, anything to occupy. For all my Longstreet friends here, you owe me. As it is, in the morning, Longstreet is not here, and Hancock is. As Hancock drives these Confederates from their hodgepodge makeshift line, and he comes streaming across the field like so many Chicagoans. Hill our generals, Robert E. Lee, A.P. Hill, the Chief of Artillery, William Nelson Pendleton, are not themselves. They're very uncharacteristic, all of them. As the Federals get to the edge of the field and start penetrating into the woods almost immediately across the street from us, we see each of these generals do things that they would not ordinarily do. The Chief of Artillery, William Nelson Pendleton, will wring his hands and go wandering to the rear, looking for someone to help save his guns. But he would not stay with his guns himself. A.P. Hill, who has watched his troops leave the field, stays behind and serves on a gun crew in Pogue's battalion. We find that when officers are in over their heads, they have a tendency to regress back to a former position that they had comfort with. So, the Lieutenant General is acting like a lieutenant on this field. And then there's Lee, the great stoic, paternal being of the Army, the soul of the Army of Northern Virginia. Confronting and shouting at people like McGowan, calling them geese, that was not calculated to rally them, it was calculated to hurt their pride. He used other choice language that nobody decided to write down because it would not be fitting for an icon. The truth is, none of these men and none of these services work. The Federals penetrate, they're about to overrun these guns. Lee has no one to stand with him. As he looks to the backside of the field, and the tree line would have been pushed back for another couple hundred yards, he would have seen a line of infantry forming up along the backside of this field and enter towards us. Perhaps it was McGowan's men rallied after all, and he races over to meet them. But he doesn't recognize them. There's a strange commander at their head, a man from the west named John Gregg. As he asks what troops these are, he's told they are the Texas Brigade. And Lee becomes highly emotional, waves his hat uncharacteristically, and shouts, "Hurrah for Texas! Texas always drives them!" Lee doesn't get excited about Texas for Texas' sake. Thank God. Quite honestly, I believe Texas originally was founded, they spelled it with 2 S's. The governor enjoyed that so much he made me a Texan on the spot. But there is only one brigade of Texans in this entire army, and they are in Longstreet's corps. So if we have Texans, Longstreet has finally arrived. Texans delight in telling us how they came forward, and they were the vanguard of hope. What they do not want to tell you is that they were not the 1st Brigade from Longstreet here. South Carolinians were the 1st Brigade, but they were engaged on the south side of the highway. They were fighting in the woods against the Federal advance, out of eyesight, so we cannot interact with that. It's Texans who decide to walk onto the bold stage and take full credit, as only Texans would want to. As they move forward to the gun line, Lee is riding with them. As they advance beyond the cannon and enter into this field, they are subject to fire from the front and from the flank. And Lee is still riding with them. Lee has been badly shaken by watching his entire right wing dissolve. He is perhaps not at his rational best, but at his emotional best. He is making a visceral decision to interact in the interplay of this battle. He, like his other generals, is not fulfilling the function that is his job. He's not the army commander. He's now little better than a brigade commander. In truth, he's not even that. He does not give orders to the Texans. He does not demand their obedience. He rides forward with them as a mere presence. He doesn't talk to them. He just wants to be with them. As they come out into the midst part of this field, very close to where we are, the men are aware that Lee is now with them, and they appeal to him to go back. Men pick up a chorus of "Lead to the rear! Lead to the rear! Go back, General Lee!" In a sense, broadcasting Lee's presence to all the Federals around him. The fire here is intense, and Lee refuses to listen. General Gregg, making his debut here in the East, finds it very difficult to be able to tell his commander to go away. He finds a judicious way by pulling his horse across Lee's path and blocking him physically. Lee reins up and goes right around the brigadier, as if he didn't exist, and continues forward, obstinate. But others start picking up on this sense. Several of the fire closers and officers will turn around and try to block Traveler, Lee's horse. A sergeant will reach out and grab the reins. And Lee will fight him until he realizes that he is a bigger distraction than the entire Federal attack. Who exactly pulled on the reins? We may never know. In the end, I think there were 25 different men who claimed to have been that Texan. A man named James Gross was probably the most likely person to grab those reins. But every Texan insists that they personally saved Robert E. Lee's life, until it becomes a great state joke. The great Marine, Thomason, wonderful writer, gives us a book called Lone Star Preacher, which is a novel based off a minister who preaches across Texas. In every little town he stops at, he meets the man that saved Lee. At the end, he says, "I don't be meaning to question your veracity, brother, but how is it that I have met so many of you, that you are legion, and we're not strong enough to drive the Yankee nation into the ocean?" And just settled on saving Lee instead. The Texans are not legion. In truth, the brigade is small, and getting smaller by the second out here. The Texans may have stopped Lee, but they didn't make him leave this field. A Virginian made him leave this field. One of his own staff officers, Charles Venable, will ride out into this field and confront his commander and put his world into perspective by saying, "General, you have been looking for General Longstreet. He is on the backside of the field. Perhaps you best speak to him." Reminding him he is an army commander and he has bigger things to do. Lee will rein up without admitting it and ride off. He'd given way. We've talking about Greg losing his cool. Me losing his cool. Robert Edward Lee has lost his cool. He quickly redeemed it and moved forward from there. The rest of Lee's staff is already sitting with Longstreet, telling him how Lee has been almost suicidal in this field, appealing to Longstreet to talk sense into the chief. When Lee pulls up, Longstreet will pull out a big cigar and smile. He'll say, "General, if you want to lead my troops, I'd rather go back where it's safe." And at that point, Lee, perhaps a bit shyly, said, "I'm glad to see you, Pete." The Texans go across this field. They have saved Robert E. Lee, but they have not saved the situation yet. We're in crisis. We have all these Federals swarming on all sides of this field. We have one lone brigade of Texans, 3 regiments of Texans, and 1 regiment of Arkansans. They're going to be charging right into their teeth. They can't possibly outnumber the Federals. They cannot possibly gain advantage over the Federals. They are a blood sacrifice to buy time for the rest of Longstreet's men to form a line and seal off the crisis. So with that, one of the things I think we should do is follow the steps of the Texans into their attack. Ed?
Oh, yes.
Let's head this way.
Now he's driven us back. We're back where we started from. We're back as the Federals. We're back along the Ewell Hill Drive. And we are beginning to entrench there. We have taken heavy casualties, but we still outnumber the Confederates about 5-1. And we are going to pull back, and Hancock is not going to be the Hancock of Gettysburg. He and Gibbon are already, their Damien and Pythias relationship of '63 is beginning to dissolve. And the Federals will not dig in, and the people on our left, you're going to notice, do not entrench nor refuse their left flank. So we have a left flank hanging in the air here. The Federals are probably not believing that the Confederates can attack again, and we're going to have General Lee is thinking of continuing the assault, and he is going to send out some recon people. He's going to send a refugee from Vicksburg, Martin L. Smith, as his chief engineer, and Moxie Sorrell, and they're going out there to plot some real trouble for the Federals. So you're now Martin L. Smith.
Oh no. We're going to be dealing more with Longstreet's counterattack when we go out to the spot where he was wounded. What I just want to do is one simple thing here before we walk back to the bus, and that is to look at the monumentation here. Not only do we have the Centennial Monument from the state of Texas, typical monuments that you see of Texas monuments on battlefields, but I also want you to notice that there's a quartz rock back over here, which was one of the very first monuments on the battlefield for Texans. And
Someone was sitting on it.
Hey, that's a good use of a Texas monument.
Somebody else is sitting on it.
All right.
Also want you to realize that there's a small marker down by the road, which looks very similar to the Jackson Arm Monument. That's because it is also one of James Power Smith's monuments.
So there he's come back to James Power Smith, his other personality.
That's right. But the ultimate awesome feature of this ground, the thing that gives us pause, is I want you to look around and notice several sinkholes in the ground. These are graves of soldiers who fell on this ground. They were exhumed later on and taken into cemeteries, into the Confederate cemetery in Fredericksburg. But these are men who had lost their lives on this very piece of ground. So, a very, very forceful reminder. The monuments might tell us that this is hallowed ground, but the graves make it indelible. All right, let's head back up to the bus. We got more fighting.
The other marker to notice is what happened because of the visit of your round table here in '62.
Right.
Over there, when this land was purchased and saved.
Very good for that.